Good morning. Today we're going to look at 1 Samuel 17 and 18. And as we ended yesterday with chapter 16, we find Saul, being tormented by demons and not able to sleep. And it's the beginning of his mental illness that, is caused by God because of his unfaithfulness. But anyway, Saul is there, and David is the only one that can soothe Saul with the playing of the lyre. So, so David has come to Saul, entered service, and in verse 23 says, whenever the evil spirit from God came upon Saul, David took his lyre, played it with his hand, and Saul would be relieved, feel better, and the evil spirit would leave him. And now in chapter 17, we begin with the Philistines and the Israelites lining up against each other for battle. And they're lined up on either side of this valley. And as they're all encamped and ready to go, the Philistines, particularly Goliath, we know this story, Goliath, David and Goliath. But Goliath comes, he says he's a champion whose height was 6 cubits and a span. And 6 cubits, approximately 18 inches. So, like 9 feet plus the span, 9.5 feet tall. This is giant. And, we don't have anybody that tall in our area, in our world now. But we've got people that are getting, around 8 feet tall. And you see one of those people alongside somebody that's, like 5'10" like I am, or say, 5'6" or whatever. Huge people. And so Goliath was a very huge and intimidating person. It says he had his helmet on, and his armor that he had on, it says weighs, 500 or 5,000 shekels of bronze. And if a shekel weighs an ounce, well, that's 300 pounds of armor that he's got just, on his upper body, plus the helmet, plus all the armor on his legs and everything else that way. And, he's got way more armor on, twice as much armor probably than what I weigh. And I weigh too much, but that's okay. But anyway, he comes out and he taunts the people, the Israelite army. He says, send your champion, and, if he wins, we will serve you. And if I win, then you will be our slaves, We'll just have a one-on-one. And think about that. We could solve all of our battles that way, one-on-one, rather than, sending all of these innocent people out to the front lines. It's just terrible. But anyway, Goliath is belittling the army, mocking them, and they're deathly afraid of him. Why wouldn't you be? I can't imagine thinking about going up against a person like that in battle. It says that they were lined up for 40 days across that way, and you can just imagine every day, his taunts get bigger and bigger, as no one comes, you just more and more that you're taunting these others. And then, it says, 3 of David's brothers are in the army. And yet it says, that David is back and forth from Saul to helping with his father's sheep in Bethlehem. And so Jesse, the dad, sends David with bread and meat and cheese and, a lot of food and provisions for his brothers plus the army. And when David gets there, of course, he hears, it says verse 19, Saul and all of the men of Israel were in the valley fighting with the Philistines. I don't really think they were doing much fighting. They were being mocked by this Goliath and pretty much, just staying where they were from, what my impression is. But David hears this Goliath challenging the Israelites. And he sees, that everybody flees from him and they're afraid. And David says to one of the men, well, what shall be done for this man who kills a Philistine? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should stand and defy the armies of God? Who is this bum, this uncircumcised Philistine, a man of no account, according to what, David would think. And the people answered, well, he's going to get to marry one of Saul's daughters. He'll be made rich, and he'll be rich and famous, whatever. Well, David's eldest brother, Eliab, heard this and got very angry with David and said, well, what do you think you're doing here? I mean, why have you left those sheep in the wilderness? I know your presumptions, you've come down to see us, and so, I mean, his brother is mad at him for who knows what reason. It doesn't seem right. But, David says, what have I done? I was only asking the question. But Saul hears of David and sends for him. And Saul says to David, you're not able to go against this Philistine to fight. You're just a boy, And so not only to think about, this Philistine being almost 10 feet tall, or even just say 9 feet tall, that's intimidating enough. And David being a boy, a shepherd, Saul says, well, you can't go up against him. But David says, I've protected my father's sheep from lions and a bear, and I went after them. I struck them down, I killed these animals with my sling and my bare hands. And David, says, let me go and fight this man. And he says, the Lord who saved me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will save me from the hand of this Philistine. And Saul says, go, and may the Lord be with you. So he tried to put his armor on him. And of course, David being a boy, not very large in stature and whatever, the armor weighed him down, and he wasn't used to wearing it. And, we kind of know how it is. You put to do something you're uncomfortable with doing, to do a new thing. But David said, I can't wear this. So he goes out, and we know this story so well. He goes out against this Philistine with 5 rocks, and it's 5 smooth rocks in his pouch, and he comes, and of course this Philistine looks at him, and this Philistine has been bragging for 40 days, and nobody has even come out against him. And to see this young boy coming out, no armor, no visible weapons, nothing. This Philistine is so overconfident, but he doesn't realize that God is on David's side. And David takes one stone, and in his sling, he runs up close and kills Goliath with that stone, takes the Goliath's sword and cuts his head off, and there's a rout. The Israelites rally and rout the army. And it's just so surprising here that, verse 58, Saul says to him, whose son are you, young man? Well, in chapter 17, didn't we just end with, David playing the lyre for Saul and soothing him? And, it's just, I don't quite understand how these dates would work, maybe. So, but anyway, David has killed Goliath, and Saul isn't sure who David is, by some, who knows what. But, so David tells him, and then when they get back to camp, Saul hears the women singing a song, Saul has killed his thousands and David his 10,000s, and the jealousy rises, and the animosity between David and Saul begin. But yet, within all of that, Saul is still intrigued enough that David does marry one of Saul's daughters who is in love with him, Michal, whichever way you want to say it. And when it says, we ended the reading today, Saul was even more afraid of David. So Saul was David's enemy from that time forward. And, it's just, David is being able to soothe Saul from his mental anguish with the playing of the lyre. He's married his daughter-in-law, and Saul yet, at this point, doesn't know that David has been anointed king. But, and within this too, David and Jonathan, Saul's son, have become very close and very good friends. And so the intrigue is there, and we know how the story folds out, but it's always interesting to me to read it and to think about and examine everything that's going on and how God is working behind the scenes. Even though he has rejected Saul as king, he hasn't just done away with Saul and completely supplanted David in place, but yet they're working together for the will of God and for the work of God in the world.